What's up, everybody? Welcome back. This is the 5th installment of the Automated Special. I'm John, joined by Apostolos, Pranav, and Kent. How's it going, guys?
Awesome.
It's going good. How are you, John?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. I'm on my way to a big 3-week vacation, so I'm very, very excited about that. But I don't want to sit here and talk about me too much. I am excited because now in this 5th installment, we're going to cover ALM deployment and some guidelines. Right? We saw the rubber meet the road. We saw Apostolos talk us through an amazing solution. And now, Pranav, you're going to show us how to deploy and manage and monitor that awesome solution, correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. Okay. So why don't you go ahead, my friend, and take it away and show us how we monitor and administrate and deal with all this goodness that Apostolos made.
The monster that Apostolos made, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So I think we saw a bunch of uh, updates that Apostolos showed us on uh, how to build like this a realistic automation with no buzzwords and stuff. And it's very critical that once you build such an automation at scale, that again from a design principle that you've thought up front, what are your guidelines going to be around deploying and sort of managing at scale? And key things that you want to think about over here is you want to make sure that it's automated as much as possible. You have to think about what's your strategy in accounts management, like when a post is built, the flows, like some of the flows were running his account. You probably don't want to run that in production. You probably want to modify those accounts to be some service accounts, and like service principles were already being used, but maybe you want to have different service principles for prod, which have lesser restrictions. And also when you set up your ALM pipelines, it gives you a good safety net that you can use a service principle to deploy your code from dev to test to prod. That means that less users have access to prod, so less users can sort of push code to prod as well. And then earlier on, when you had set up your environments, like one of your strategies could have been around setting up different policies for dev and prod. So there's a different group in M365 we showed you called RPA Dev, and now there's a different group called RPA Prod. So you can start to sort of create more restricted environments and start to play around with the accounts, with the settings, how many machines you need. Like now that you have some ROI data flowing through, you can estimate like how many attended VMs do you need for the bots to run on. And then do you want to monitor in real time or not? And that's one of the new features that came out is like, let's say you're processing one request of invoices of an invoice request, which has 20 invoices attached to it. So now you can have, as each invoice is getting processed, you can get like real time information. But you might not want to have all the information in real time across as well. So you have to decide a few of these strategies over here. And how do you think about upgrades? So since it's a SaaS service, a lot of the orchestration happens in the cloud, but there is some component of the RPA which runs on the unattended VMs as well. So what's going to be your machine setup and upgrade strategy? You want to make sure that the machines are consistent, like either using VDIs as a consistent way to set up, where you have the same base Windows version and the app version, and the resolutions are the same. So you kind of have to think about how you roll it out, and then how do you scale your automation as well. So let's say you started with 10 VMs and then you're seeing spikes. So how do you handle those spikes and sort of add or remove VMs maybe as one of the strategies to the cluster? Or you can also use one of the new features called prioritized queues, where let's say you have these 10 invoices being processed and you get another request from a VIP person. And so at runtime, an admin can come and sort of reprioritize one of the queues as well. So there are a lot of sort of controls available sort of now that you have to think about. The core of this time that we'll talk about is around ALM, which is around setting best guidelines around moving your code from dev to production. And I just have this little diagram to orient ourselves on what does roughly ALM mean. Like all it is about is application lifecycle management with either Azure DevOps, or you can use GitHub Actions as well. And the key idea is Power Platform plays in the tools and the processes that you have. And so if you have Azure DevOps, you can use Azure DevOps or GitHub. And if you have any custom policies defined in Azure DevOps or on GitHub on who can approve, who can deploy to prod, all these Power Automate will play in it. And roughly there are three stages in the ALM journey. Like there is a dev journey where as once you've checked in your code into solution, then you can trigger off a build and then produce a solution, unmanaged solution file that you can then deploy into test, run a suite of test cases. And once the test cases pass, then you can have some pre-approval or pre-deployments gates before you deploy into production. And one of the gates could be send an admin approval, make sure that when you make a pull request into your repo, it meets all the compliance criterias, all the static rules, analyzers are passing and stuff, and like maybe more than 3 people have to review it. So you can already set up all these policies today, and then RPA will just sort of play in it. And so let's go ahead and see how it looks like in practice for us. So this was a solution that Bossless had kind of built, so Heat. And what I'm going to show you first is I'm going to show you how the pipeline is set up in Azure DevOps. I'm going to kick off a few builds, and then I'm going to show you how the pipeline is set up in GitHub as well. Like the first step, as we saw, was around export from dev. And this is Azure DevOps. It's using the classic pipeline mode where you can add these pipeline steps visually. And all it does is it installs the Power Platform installer. Then it all expands a task for a solution export, and then it unpacks the solution and it creates a PR in your repo with all the changes that are available. The next step is to build the solution, which is it takes the exported file and then imports it into the test environment and publish it as a artifact drop. And then here it runs the test cases as well. I've disabled it because the first time I want to show you how the pipeline works if everything is successful, and then once I introduce the test, then the solution is not promoted into prod. And the last step is around uh, deploying the build into prod. And so this is what's called a release pipeline concept that you can create in DevOps. You trigger this when there's a successful prod build. And what you can do is you can have these pre-approval checks that you can send this person an email, and only when this person approves it will the build be deployed into prod. So let's go ahead and trigger these tasks. uh, and we can see sort of what happens into each of these tasks. So let me just go ahead and load up one of the tasks that ran initially. So export for dev, it will go through all these tasks and it'll check out the project, and then it'll create a repo here where it'll check in your files. So this is your workflow files will be shown over here, and then you have all the source control history, so you can do diff of all the versions that are available. And this is the solution file that contains your flows, your entities, your apps, and everything around it. So and then this was the build solution. So what happens here is this is going to take the build that was produced earlier, and it's going to queue it up. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you a path that's going to fail in the interest of time, because this takes some time to run. So this is an example of a build. So this is build 114 that was successful over here. And then if I run this one, it'll queue it up. So it'll wait for this first build to complete, and then it'll kick off the last one. And if the builds are successful, then I can kick off a new release branch over here, and I can pick the build version. So in this case, it was 114 was the last successful build I had. So I can say create a successful release. And what this will do is this will then send me an email saying that, this build needs to be approved. And only when I approve it will this code be deployed into production. Uh, and once the code is deployed into production, uh, this is prod US. So you'll see the solution show up over here. You will see that the solution is now a managed solution, so I can't edit it. And that's one of the best practices we follow, where in dev you can edit, and in prod you cannot edit over there. So this is an example of how you can take your production, your code from dev to prod, and also you can run test cases as well. So I showed you a pipeline which is going to run the test cases here. So let's just quickly look at how the tests are built up as well. So the test task over here is I'm running this called .NET build and a .NET test. And in my repository over here, what I've done is, as part of my solution, I've written a test case. And so what I've done over here is an HTTP-based trigger, which can be called through any endpoint. And then how I've structured my solution is that any logic in my solution that I want to test, I've put it in a child flow. Like you saw Apostolos yesterday, he had a lot of child flows around, getting a bearer token or getting status or doing this. Then we can further modularize everything that we want to test into our child flow, so that both the main product code and the test code can just call the child flow, and then so both are calling the same code. And so all it does is it just calls it, and returns a response back. And then I have written in my test code, I've written test using a .NET test runner. The idea over here is like you can just call this API and do your assertions. You don't have to use the .NET test runner. You can use NUnit, XUnit, uh, JavaScript runners and stuff. The whole idea is that this will participate in your ecosystem as well. And then if you have, you can structure this test in two ways. Like I've checked in my test into my code base as well, but you could have had a different solution for test, and then you can have test per department. So you can start mapping out your test cases for the BUs that are available in the Power Platform as well. So it's a good way of organizing your test case, where if your team includes both developers and citizen developers, then you can have this model where tests are there. But if there's a more central COE that's managing a lot of citizen developers, then you can have a centralized test case that you can manage as well. So that's how I basically set up my entire test pipeline over here. And so this pipeline is running, and we'll come back to it after it's done to see sort of what happened. Similarly, on the GitHub side, I can do the same stuff. So this is my GitHub repo. Here, basically what I've done is I've defined two actions. So this is the GitHub action for, I'll just run this. So this is the GitHub action for exporting from dev to prod. Again, so this uses the Power Platform build tools. It connects to your dev environment. And then there is the second workflow, which is takes that unmanaged solutions, deploys it into test, and then it runs the same set of test cases that I had defined. And then if the test cases pass, then it deploys it into prod as well. So you can start to have the same set of workflows over there. And then inside GitHub, you can have your own policies over here on what's your branching strategy, who can check into main, who can approve the PRs that go into main and stuff. So you can start to do that. And then, if any of the tests fail, so in this case, you saw that this test failed, and that's why the build was not produced. And then if you inspect the results, you'll see the whole stack of exceptions on why the test failed and stuff. So this gives you a very comprehensive set of controls to automate your process of deploying from test into prod as well. And it catches errors. Like often enough, you might have checked in code into your RPA scripts where you might have broken the exception handling or the logging or the throwing exceptions, and now you can sort of define different test cases to test different scenarios.
So Pranav, one question that often comes up from customers is like, could they schedule this? Like, so for example, if they wanted to always make sure they had a backup of their config from a dev environment, is this something that could be scheduled like every, say, lunch hour or every evening or anything like that?
Absolutely. So you have different strategies on triggering those builds. What I'm going to show you right now is basically a flow that I've written that triggers the build in DevOps. Um, and so right now it's a button, it's a manual trigger, but you can change it to be a recurrence. And so, or you can change to be HTTP, and you can post the link. You can trigger it from your Teams channel. And so you can build a bot out of it as well. And then this queues up the build. Or you can have policies where you kick off builds on a certain time of the day as well. So you can automate the whole initial task of triggering that build as well.
So there you go, John. You could be out having wings in a post-COVID world and click a button on your Power Automate mobile device and actually push to prod if you wanted.
That's so funny. I was just sitting here tuning out, thinking about wings because I don't really understand a whole lot of this DevOps stuff. It's well above my head, but it's very cool to see how we can even automate this side of things where, this is definitely beyond that citizen developer realm. It's very important for people to know about setting up that sandbox and making sure that things are happening properly. But yeah, man, I could really go for some hot wings right now. Oh, it's time to wake up.
Yeah, no, like it's definitely the Fusion team model where citizen developers will build, and the pro developers again will help sort of bring this sort of robustness, especially for these enterprise automation scenarios which are touching business critical processes, and then make sure the right guardrails in place so that the citizen developers accidentally don't check in code that's gonna cause some downstream impact, like paying somebody else as a HR payroll system. So it's a good, to your earlier conversation, it's a good Lego building boxes sort of coming together. And it sort of fits very nicely also where citizen developers upfront don't have to go and sort of understand the entire DevOps cycle and stuff. It can just be set up for them, and everything is automated using these triggers and stuff. So even they can trigger off the build at some point when they're done, and they just wait for the result to happen.
And I guess the other nice thing about this is in that sort of decentralized world where you might have makers that have access in one environment and are building in that environment, but you don't want them to have access in the target environment. You can use the DevOps or the ALM model in order to get that configuration into that target environment without needing to give a whole lot of access because that's all being automated. And you can restrict who needs to have access into that prod environment as well, which I think is really important as in addition.
Yep, exactly. And all this maps to the same groups and policies that we had defined in M365. So remember, we had created an RPA dev US and RPA prod US, and then you can have restricted access in the prod environment and stuff. And even your service principals will have restricted environment or access into prod. Yeah. So the other part I wanted to show you was also once you've deployed this automation at scale, you can also generalize your whole system as well, where this for queuing up a build, it works for a single solution, but you can take a solution name as an input over here, and you can sort of parameterize your entire organization as well. Whereas an IT, then you can say, this central trigger can be used to trigger different solutions as well, instead of just a single solution. So you can start to sort of make this easier for your citizen developers to be able to kick off builds and sort of get results and see kind of what happened, and slowly start to enable them to be able to fix their changes themselves.
And what we've seen also with customers building is that they have a Power Virtual Agent chatbot for the citizen makers. So whenever they have completed their solution, or they have a stable state, they just go in a conversational kind of mode. They specify the solution, and this is then triggering in the back end as well the Azure DevOps operations. Yeah.
Yep. No, that's good. So yeah, like now like we've deployed our automation through all these gates. So let's just see how the monitoring aspect of this automation is going to look like. So here, what I have is, if you look at just any one of our our flows, which is a flow where I've run quite a lot. Let's see. So this is our cloud flow. It has had successful runs. We now have this analytics view, which shows you from an end-to-end processing, how many times did it run, what were the number of actions that ran today, what was the usage like per day, what were the error rates like. And so this is good to understand, like from a cloud flow perspective, like how many actions are you running, and if you're hitting any sort of throttling limits that might be there in your subscription. The second thing you can do this is a maker monitoring experience where I can just see the results from a 30-day perspective. I also have access to this new tab, which we were talking about in our demo yesterday, also is the desktop flow runs. So this gives you a perspective in real time as to what's happening with all the desktop executions and stuff. And this allows you, again, to monitor all your desktop flows that are running across all your gateways in a single environment perspective. And then if you want to sort of go ahead and have a view of your UI flows across all your environments, then the platform does provide APIs so that you can extract all the logs out. And this is a view that we are seeing in the COE toolkit, which is an extensibility sort of app or toolkit which has been built on the platform, leveraging the platform APIs and the connectors. And this view is showing you all the Power Automate or the desktop flows running across all the environments in your tenant itself. So you can start all the way simple from a maker perspective, then you can go from an admin perspective for all your desktop flows, and then you can go throughout your organization and see sort of what's happening over there. In Apostles, like I think we missed seeing some of the runs that were happening yesterday. Do you have it up that you can show us?
Yeah, let me check. Yeah, let me share my screen. So those are the desktop flow runs of the history. Here you see also, of course, the running ones. And here's the new preview queue where you can see your gateways, and then simple stats. So how many desktop flows are queued, how many are running, how many machines do you have in your gateway cluster. And this will then, if you drill down further, this will give you then the queue list actually, and you see also the flow which is being executed. And here you have the queue run. Here you would see also the errors and so on. So if I, for whatever reason, need to reprioritize that particular flow here, I could go to change priority and set it high or normal, or I can even put it at the top of the list. So the next time this has finished, the next one will be picked up, and this is the one in the third row now. Okay, and if I want to look at the desktop flow itself, I can go also here and see then the history of the ones which have been completed, of course. And here I see that from the desktop flows, all actions which have been specified within my desktop flow. So I have a subroutine, a subflow, which is here calling get current date in the initialize bot sequence. Then I have set variable, create list, and so on. If I look here at the set variable, I look at the input details, for instance, here I see then I'm passing in a JSON string, which is our processing statuses. So these are Dataverse choices or option sets. And those are the different statuses you can have on the processing side. And this is how I can then review and see, okay, if one of those was failing, I would see here, of course, then a failed flow. So let's go back and see if we have some failed one. We have one here from yesterday. So here again, the overall problem was that the close action couldn't find a window to be closed. So if I go down here, it should be somewhere down there, I think at the close window action. Okay, maybe it's even further down into to scroll down. Let's go to another one. All runs. Look at this one. We have here an error. So if you look at the run subflow, this was again a general error. If I click on that failed one, I look here at the output details. There was nothing. Input details. Okay, it was just the function which has failed was here the initialize bot function. Okay, so this is on an action level. You can really see here, okay, what records, even on a record level, if you are within a subroutine or for the whole desktop flow, which ones are being run successful, queued, and what errors you had on that level. So if I go back, of course, then in the overall list, this is then the whole history I have here to my for reviewing. Okay, so if we are on the flow side again, so if we go back to the solution and I click here on the analytics part, this is what Pranav I think just showed as well. We have the analytics by action usage, so you can see, okay, as an overview, last 30 days, how many runs I had total, how many of those 34% was failing. Then you have your peak times. You see, okay, in those days, there were maybe something with the infrastructure was wrong, so we can really drill down with the standard reports into the respective flow runs. Here is another analytics. I think it's the same for the same flow. Yes, let's go to another flow. Let's open the solution. And let's look at the other one, which is processing the emails actually. So here, this one. And I go to analytics. You can also go on the errors. And here's your distribution. Okay, what action has failed, the error type, let's say bad request, action failed. Most of the time it will be, of course, action failed if there's something wrong either with the input data or there's been some unexpected UI changes maybe on this solution or on the software you are automating with, and all those will be played back, as I said, on the action level. And here see also total count, okay, applied to each email attachment were the ones which were failing the most because maybe of wrong attachment types or any other corrupted data in there. Okay, so back to you, John.
Awesome. So we lost Pranav to a Windows update there, and he'll be back shortly. Oh, he's rejoined.
There you go, just in time.
Awesome. Welcome back, Pranav. So, okay, man, that was a lot of high-level stuff, but very important, right? We talk a lot about the building of these and the creation of these and enabling people to make them, but again, it's very important to understand our pipelines and how we set all this up so that we can be more efficient, right? so that we're not building things directly in production, so that we have proper permissions and data loss prevention policies in place, so that we have proper pipelines to make sure that things are getting tested and checked before they release. There's all these things that come along with this journey of low code, no code. And so, for me, this area is not very applicable. Luckily, I operate more in that citizen developer space where somebody has already set all this wonderful stuff up for me. But for those of you who are in charge of this, this is a massive important step to understand, to make sure that your users can be successful, to make sure that the company can be successful with the tools, and that the users aren't doing things they shouldn't be, and that there's proper processes in place so that you can understand how things are being deployed, and then also what those things are doing once they're deployed. I think Kent, Pranav, any final comments on this one?
Well, I think the way I would look at it is sometimes people do perceive that Power Automate is only for citizen developers. And I think what all of this really demonstrates is that regardless of where you're at in that spectrum from citizen to COE, we've got you covered, right? And I think the other opportunity here, as we've talked a lot about, is this idea of Fusion Dev, right? Where you can implement those governance capabilities, those building blocks, and then allow your makers to go ahead and build and really democratize who in the organization is building these automations in order to scale. So really think of it as the best of both worlds. And you as an organization just need to find out what is the right balance for you, but do know that the platform has a lot of rich capabilities. The other thing I'd say is there's some of these bits were just recently released, which is great in terms of like our vision and how we're continuing to iterate on top of the service. So if you're not familiar with these things, that would be why, because these are brand new items that have just been released.
Awesome. All right. Pranav, how about you?
Yeah, I would just like second that, like there are tools available for everybody to use. Like not everybody has to use all the tools. So John, don't worry about it. I got you. I'll set it up for you. You just go build, go nuts. And the second aspect about this session was around the monitoring and the ops part of it, which is very relevant to the RPA space as well, because a lot of the COEs just want to make sure that all the bots are running in a reliable manner and they have the controls to monitor them in real time if they want to, and then prioritize the automation that's running so they're addressing the business needs as they're coming in. And so yeah, a lot of the features that sort of came out, as Kent was saying, hopefully you folks like it. Go build.
Awesome. Okay, you heard the man. Go and build. This is it for episode number 5 of the Automated Special. We'll see you back in the next video.